started the recording.
Okay.
Sorry, forgot my Post-it note.
Okay, then call to order. It's at 10:02. Roll call, please.
Austin,
Present.
Here.
Filter, Dombrowski, Jacobson,
Here.
Kim.
Here.
Rosenthal.
Here.
From CCS, we have Rebecca Malinowski and Beth Strombert. Deborah is not joining. Is that correct, Rebecca?
You're muted.
I don't think so. It wasn't originally on her list, so we'll see.
Are there any additions to the agenda? All right. And I don't see any public. I know Sarah Murray was anticipating attending, and maybe she would have had comments, or she could be ex officio. The minutes on January 29, 22, can I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second.
So Andy approves and Lauren seconds. Any discussion? All right. Can we, since we have to do roll call, right?
Austin,
Yes.
DiDonato,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Rosenthal.
Yes.
Okay, we're moving on to the development fund, which is we have an action item here. So I'm assuming both items are action. Are we going to do votes on both these things, or one vote for both?
I think we would want to do two separate actions. One to approve the development fund list after a discussion, and then if we're ready to recommend the fiscal accountability policy changes, that would be a separate action.
Okay.
But I think we can do the budget and the billings together when we get that far.
That sounds right to me. That as long as we're clear to whoever needs clarity on it. Okay, for the development fund, updated development fund list. Do we want to do a motion and a second? Because, or do you want to have a discussion first?
Could we have a quick discussion? At our last meeting, we were talking about removing the authentication tool, and I believe you were going to get some feedback from your staff and see if anyone had, if you heard any objections to removing that from the list.
Yeah, we don't have any objections here.
Yeah, my IT manager said it's just not this time, but maybe some other day, but not now. So we would like to remove it as well.
Our staff feel around like that we have a lot going on right now, so maybe another day.
That sounds great.
So can we have a motion to approve the development fund removing the authentication tool for single sign-on?
So moved.
And the total for that, Rebecca, is 419,823?
Yes.
Okay. Put that in the motion. Do we have a
Yes.
second?
Yeah, friendly amendment, yes.
Second.
Lauren second. So Jim motions and Lauren seconds. Any more discussion? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
I'll start with DiDonato,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Rosenthal,
Yes.
Austin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Rebecca, let's discuss the fiscal accountability policy that you put together for us.
Yes. So at our last meeting, we talked about some potential language and how we could write a policy that would give us some sort of structure and stability without boxing us in unnecessarily. So I did not include the whole fiscal accountability policy in your packet because it's very lengthy, but in the section on budget and reserves, you'll see I added some potential language that the goal of CCS is to maintain a balance of not less than, and as a placeholder I put 75, and not more than 150% of the total estimated cost of all items on the list of potential uses for development fund. The Budget and Finance Committee will consider options to increase or reduce the balance of the development fund with each budget cycle. So I have that language that we can talk about, and then I also would like to touch on what, if we're happy with that language, what those percentages should be. So that sort of screwy spreadsheet I sent you previously was just to kind of show us what those numbers might look like. So at the top of the sheet, I have the items from the development fund list and a potential cost, and some of that's adjusted. Like the website cost is a little bit different than originally planned. And then I have when we'd be spending certain chunks of that. So first year of Vega would probably be paid in 2022. And we'd have a little bit left of our website payments in 2022. So I'll skip the 2021 budget and just say, looking at these rows 10 through 15. So if we spent, based on our current budget projections, including these potential spends from the development fund, at the end of 2022, the development fund balance, if we didn't put anything into it or give a rebate, wait, I want to make sure I say this right. My own spreadsheet is confusing me. Okay, so at the end of 2022, if we didn't give a rebate, we would have a balance of about $520,000 in the development fund. So then these over here, these numbers, these 75%, 100, 150, those are based on this expected amount from the development fund list. So at the end of 2022, without adding anything, we'd have about $314,000 worth of spend on the development fund list. So I just wanted to show you what 75% to 200% of that would look like, and then how that would compare to our balance. So just so you can kind of see, like, okay, if we're saying we're going to have up to 200% of the development fund uses as an available balance, how much could that be? And where are we in comparison? Okay, Lauren is nodding, but I haven't completely talked myself in circles. So if Lauren gets it, I'm happy.
Yeah, we're all leaning on you here, Lauren. No, this makes total sense to me.
Mhm.
After you explained it to me over the phone weeks ago, it made total sense to me.
It makes sense to me as well. I think we had, is what's in the draft, the 75 to 150%. So
Yes.
if we were to end at 520 and the max is the 150, then there would be a $472,000 balance, and we're saying that we would distribute 50,000. We're saying that the committee would look at, I mean, we're not committed, we're not tying hands at all, but the committee would look at distributing anywhere between the 236,000 to the 50,000 plus delta of 472 and 230. I'm sorry, but yes, I think this is, I like the way this is written because it doesn't obligate anything. We're not, the point of this isn't to force CCS into making decisions that aren't what we want to do, but that it does provide some guidelines for an annual look to say, hey, you know, based on 520, we really think, you know, at 150% of the previous year, that you know, at least $50,000 can probably go back to the libraries, unless we have something compelling coming up in the next year, in which case we're going to be like, no, we're gonna, you know, that's a good guideline, but we, you know, because we have something big coming up next year, we're just going to keep the whole balance there. So I think this is worded perfectly.
I guess my question is, we said 75 to 150. And I remember Lauren, I think you just chose those numbers 75 to 150. Would it make more sense to be like 100 to 150? Do we always want to be fully funded in the development fund?
I wouldn't be opposed to that at all.
Like, I don't.
I'm not opposed to it, but I will tell you why I popped 75% in there. When the development fund list could have multi-year projects that are multiple years out. Like, I do not want to do this, but if we were going to do an ILS migration and we're planning like a $500,000 project or, $750,000 project, but we're planning it 4 years from now, I'd like to be starting to build those reserves, but I wouldn't need to carry that full balance for the full 4 years. So that was my thinking. Again, I don't see that on the horizon, and nothing would stop us from saying, nothing would preclude us from later saying, well, we want to build up to this big project, so we're going to be under our target for a few years. So I'm very comfortable either way.
That makes sense to me. So any other comments about the policy? All right. Well, Rebecca, really great job. I think it looks great. I think it captures everything that we were trying to capture with this, while leaving us the leeway to be able to make decisions.
Yeah, can I also, because I'm good at numbers, and what makes sense in my head is not necessarily what comes out of my mouth. So I really appreciate, Rebecca, that you managed to formulate the ideas I had floating around and put it into something that was concise and clear. So thank you.
Well said. I'm assuming Lauren's going to want to make a motion.
I would like to move to make those additions to the CCS fiscal accountability policy.
Can we have a second, please?
I'll second.
Who was that?
That was Andy.
Thank you, Andy. Beth, if you're there, Beth, could you do roll call?
Great, writing, yes. Rosenthal,
Yes.
Austin,
yes,
Donato,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Kim.
Yes.
And can I just confirm, I have Lauren as a motion and Andy as a second.
Correct. Rebecca, do you want to talk about rebates now, or is that part of this conversation, or is that part of the budget conversation?
I should just stop muting myself. I think we can talk about it as part of the budget.
Okay.
Because the development fund tab in particular is one that that I was working on in between meetings.
All right, let's go through the budget then.
Okay. So the budget has just some minor changes from when you last saw it, based on the conversation that we had. I reduced the professional development budget. So it's about half of what it was last year. So it's more than we are planning to spend this year, but half of our total budget from last year. So I think that is reasonable. And then I adjusted the personnel budget a little bit, again, based on our discussion. We do have 2 potential changes to insurance benefits that will start in the next fiscal year, 2 changes in elections. So this is pretty significantly increased because it has those 2, but then also a cushion in case there's an unexpected election. So it looks like it's going up a lot. And then it also, of course, includes a planned increase to our fees just from WIN. The big piece that we didn't have an opportunity to talk about last time is the development fund budget. So as you can see here, I didn't pop in a development rebate amount, but we certainly have the leeway to do that now. It's easy to pop it in and everything will update. So I significantly reduced our budgeted amount of projected interest for next year. Hopefully it'll be more than $500, but who knows? Who knows? We are expecting a couple of payments to the development fund from our new members, and of course our Rails grant support is here as well. Special contractual includes some finishing work on the website, and then we always like a little cushion in there in case we need something comes up, but it's pretty minimal. And then special software is year one of Vega Discover. So if governing board chooses to go live on that, it would probably be in Q1 of calendar year 2022 or thereabouts. So that spend would not hit until we do decide to go live. And if we don't decide to go live, we don't owe anything. And then we have in here to expend the Rails grant support in the same manner that we had been doing. That would leave us with a final balance of $520,000. And then fiscal accountability policy says that we want to have a final balance in operating that is, sorry, I thought I had this in here. That is based on the previous year's actual expenditures. So this would be 25%, and then this would be 50%. That's from so, I mean, we've been sticking closer to the 25%. So at this point, I don't have any transfer budgeted to development. We'd be a little bit over the 25. So that leaves us here with our balance of 520. We have $314-ish thousand, and then 1.5 times 3, 472. I don't know why I didn't just put this all in here, but I didn't. So as Lauren correctly estimated earlier, we'd be looking at about $50,000 of excess. So we could hold on to it for another year and then do a bigger rebate. We could just pop it back to libraries at this time. We do have a third option that I don't entirely recommend, which would be to knock $50,000 off the billings. Okay, cool. I see some head shakes. I like that strategy as well, or I dislike that strategy as well. So
yeah. So if we do that, there are some libraries for whom it gets really complicated going to their board explaining those dips, and so we just don't want to put them in an awkward position.
I'm 100% on board. So yeah, I guess the question is, do we want to do rebates where we're sending, like we're already going to be sending a rebate check for the Rails support grant, so we could add on to that, and it's not a ton of extra work. Or we could, again, hang on to it and then do a bigger rebate next year.
I love rebates, but it's a pretty small amount of money. And for the amount of work it would be for CCS to be cutting all these checks, I kind of feel like for under 50,000, I might as well just let it ride for the following year.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking less than $2,000 a library, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Let's just let it ride for another year. You never know. I mean, we've had some crazy times the last 12 and 18 months. I think this is a cushion that a lot of libraries can probably absorb. And then if next year works out really well, then hey, it's a little bit extra. That's okay.
So the Rails support grant, the 188,000, we are going to rebate that.
Yes, unless I don't see any other immediate use for it. And it's sort of like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Like we could say, oh, we're going to pay for Vega development with this, which is what Pinnacle is doing. So we pay for Vega for the development partner program with the Rails money. Well, then we have the $77,000 of our own budget anyway. So yeah, I think it makes sense to just forward that to libraries.
So to Lauren's point of like it being annoying, we're already doing it. So we're just adding 48,210 on top of the 187. And so like we're at what, 220, 230 or more, 240. And so it's not a big deal to add that, as I guess, from a workflow process.
Guess I hadn't thought about it that way. I thought it was two different checks.
I might be
guess,
wrong.
yeah.
Now, I would just say, we will be issuing the Q4 Rails check to libraries in the next couple of weeks or month, and we could add the development fund rebate onto that. We did do that last year. So it's not a second check. It's really 2 line items on the same check, and we would include detail on what those amounts are for. So in that regards, if it's easier to just rebate it now and not worry about it, I appreciate you worrying about the workflow, but it's really not that much more.
And to me, like we just passed a policy saying 150% and we're immediately breaking it. And like, for some reason that strikes me as not necessarily the direction we want to go, even if it's only 48,000, only $2,000 more per staff. If it doesn't mess up the workflow, I'm like, we just passed the policy. If we thought it should be 160%, we should have passed 160% and then it would have been fit. But we passed 150. Let's just go with the 48,210. It's not because I want the extra $2,000. I don't like, of course I do, but like, and we'll make good use of it, but let's just do it. Let's just do it all at once in my mind.
That's a good point, Mick. I agree. That's a good point.
We're so directory, like we have policies, but we know when we want to follow them.
Well, I didn't want to seem too dogmatic, right? Because I felt like I was the one that was kind of pushing for this, and the point of it wasn't to be dogmatic. Was just supposed to be, take an evaluative look every year. So, but yeah, no, we're good.
If it was like $200, I agree, but 48,000, I say we combine it. And we'll vote on that. But my next question is, at one point we were talking about percentage in, percentage out. Is that part of this calculation? And is that part of the Rails grant, or is that development rebate? Is that and the Rails grant is equal?
Yeah, I think we should talk about it. So last year, in previous years, and including this year, so for this 164,000, the formula that Rails used was really based on like consortium wide metrics, with one small exception, which was the percent of the library's operating budget that a library paid in consortium fees. So for those libraries who met the certain threshold that Rails set, they got kind of like a bonus in their rebate, because CCS got more money because they were like less funded libraries. So we passed that funding back to those specific libraries. Outside of that small component, it made a difference of like $1,500 in the rebates. Everybody got the same amount. This year, Rails has changed the formula. And it is, and by this year, I mean for 2022, it is different to say the least. So it's it's moving towards equity. What Rails has done is they've both changed the metrics that they use to calculate the amounts, and then they've also changed sort of the calculation. So like previously, things were just sort of like flat. It was like either a yes or no, or a flat number and then a percent whole based on the flat number. But they've moved into this like quartile structure. So this collection expenditures per capita is a good example. They've taken all of the library's collection expenditures, per capita. And then they have divided them into quartiles. So these are all the libraries across all of the consortia. They've divided them into quartiles, and then they've assigned an amount per library per quartile. So CCS has nobody in the first quartile. None of our libraries are sort of at the lowest 25% of spending per capita of all the libraries that are served by this grant. So we don't get any awards of this $3,000. We have 2 libraries that qualify for this amount, and we have 3 libraries that qualify for this amount. And then most of our libraries qualify for like the smallest amount because they have the greatest spending. They're already well funded. And so you can see kind of how that balances out into the financial allocation over here. And they do the same. So again, the annual fee before, it was just like yes or no, they meet a threshold. Now it's looking at like the whole distribution. And that really changes things. Like again, most of our libraries are not in this kind of lowest chunk, whereas, you know, Prairie Cat and RSA have a lot of smaller libraries. Swan is kind of more balanced. This is the only, this metric is the same. Interlibrary loan, this is just looking at the total amount of interlibrary loan and RB that we as a group do compared to the other consortia and how much they do. So despite our size being smaller, we do a lot of ILL and RB. Our members are really active, placing holds and visiting other libraries. And then we don't get anything for a non-public bonus. So this is not applicable to us. So we could get the data from Rails of which libraries fall into which categories, and then specifically allocate that amount and like pass through exactly like, okay, Rails, you know, said, and I don't know the numbers, but Rails said Fox River Valley is in the second quartile and should get 2,000 of these dollars, and that Northbrook is in the top quartile and should only get 800 of these dollars. And we could like recreate the Rails math and expend that way. Or we could apply our funding formula and just look at our percent holes and apply that way. Or we could just divide it equally among members and say, here's the support we got from Rails. Like a good chunk of the award that we're receiving is based on interlibrary loan and RB stats, which is sort of this like collective component. So I think we could still make a reasonable argument that like, we're really looking at the group as a whole. So I'm open to any of these. Again, this would not take effect until July, like the first quarter of next year, and that first payment. So we do have time if we want to kind of play with the numbers to decide how we want to actually rebate those funds.
Are you suggesting that the Rails rebate will be different than the rebate from CCS, or it could be that we could combine them and do them all the same, or?
Either. They've been calculated separately, although they've both been relatively like, we just split it and send it. They're different, as Beth said, they're different line items on the check anyway. So it doesn't like, they're both numbers we've calculated at the beginning of the year and then deal with. It's not something that would be like an ongoing thing. So from a workload point of view, either works for me. I think that it's worth discussing, and I think it's worth discussing them separately.
I agree. I think I'm really glad you showed this. I'm leaning, and I'll put this out here, this is not because I'm firm, for the CCS one, the rebate from us, I'm leaning towards the suggested percentage of expenditure being the percentage you take in or you receive back, rebate. So if
So
you,
like what you, like if you pay 4.2% of the total library billings, you would get 4.2% back.
that's what I'm for the CCS, because that, we can't do anything about the past
Yeah.
and, whatever, but we'll move forward. That makes sense to me. Like you guys said before, we hadn't done rebates before, so we just gave everybody the same thing because we're like, we didn't even think about it, but now we've had time to think about it. But this is different. And I don't know. I think that Rails is going for equity. I think we should honor that. But that's my thoughts. Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's good thinking. I like the equity.
I hear where you're coming from, Rebecca, by saying, well, the calculations are made up, by, there's a lot of weight on ILLs, and that, can be the bigger libraries assisting. But I agree with the others that if Rails is spelling this out with the intention of spreading it out for folks that need it, then yeah, I'm all in for it. If it's not too onerous for CCS to have to do yet another calculation, right? Because if we're gonna do the development rebate in one calculation and this one, but I mean, you're only doing it the one time, like once you get the formula set up then. So if you're okay with doing it, then I agree. This seems like the most fair way.
Right. So your first option of getting the Rails, getting like which CCS libraries in quartile 2 for dollars per library, and which CCS libraries are in quartile 1 for LSAP annual fee. If we could find out who those libraries are, and then, they get.
Yeah, I should be able to get that directly from Grant over at Rails. There's no reason I should have to figure that out separately. So once I have that, it's just addition, which I'm pretty good at. I have Excel. And then I guess I think these two are pretty straightforward. Like whatever quartile you're in, that's the dollars that you get. When we look at interlibrary loan and RB, we could, like Rails doesn't have any data on who's doing these transactions. They just have our system-wide number. So this we could divide just amongst the libraries. Or what I'm a little bit more nervous about is we could we could look at our stats and say this library had 10% of this interlibrary loan and RB transactions, and this library had 6%, and apply those percentages. I feel like it's a little stickier with like number of renewals and the RB transactions include non-CCS libraries, but I guess that's fine. Like it's a little bit goopier. We could make it work though, if we wanted to be straight. Like we want like you get in what you get out what you put in. Because there are libraries that are more generous with their policies. And there are libraries that take on a bigger burden, geographically. And so I can figure it out. And again, we have some time. I can run some numbers. We could look at it in, well, Deborah can review it with you. I can do the numbers and then Deborah can review it with you sometime in Q1 of next year before the checks go out.
I'm not sure that I think like the ILL, I get it. It seems like a lot of work and a lot of nuance. Like you said, I would avoid that if I were you, if I was us. And I would just apply the percentage again, potentially, or just equal, like the percentage, like the 4.2%, like we were talking about for the CCS grant, CCS rebate, that is, or we just split this one equally, because though some of us might not necessarily do as many ILLs, everyone's open to it, and it's going to be like $400 difference for 27 libraries, like, oh, Evanston does all of Chicago, they get $2,500 or $2,800. And, you know, Zion Benton's up in the Wisconsin border, so they don't do ILL with, you know, the entire northern part of them. And they get $1,800, you know, it's like not much difference. What do other people think?
Yeah, Rebecca, are there any potential cons to what we're talking about here? Like, do you foresee any sort of, you know, negative feedback for that?
I mean, certainly we'll see, like our best funded libraries are going to get less from this grant. And those libraries that are, you know, best funded are in a lot of cases, those libraries that are paying in the most to CCS already. So, you know, I think it depends on, you know, who is helming each of those ships at that time. We've been talking a lot about, like in long range, as part of long range planning, we've been talking about like, how do we deal with equity? Like, are we being inclusive? And there's not, you know, like we stopped short of saying like, you know, we want to subsidize every library in Illinois who potentially wants to join. But I think this is something that is sort of clear enough and comes with the change in the rail. Like if we just decided on our own, like we're going to do this differently, I think that would be a harder pill to swallow. But because, you know, Rails spent all this time developing this new formula and looked at a whole bunch of scenarios, I think we have like a good leg to stand on, I guess. And I don't think we'd get a ton of pushback, but I think there's always going to be people who, you know, want to advocate really strongly for their own institution, and they could see a decrease here.
Thank you.
Well, and we are addressing that with the way we're going to distribute their CCS rebates.
Correct.
We're like, hey, we're doing that with our money. All the money you put in, this is money that we would not have gotten. Let's say the number one in the LSAP annual fee is Carrie, and we got $3,590. If they weren't part of us, we wouldn't have gotten that $3,590 at all. It's not like you're losing money. We're just passing through the money. So I mean, I can see why people would want to argue that, but it doesn't hold much water in my mind. I don't know if other people disagree with me. I can go down rabbit holes.
No, I agree completely. And I guess I'm at one of the bigger libraries now. So, and I was certainly at one of the smaller libraries before. And that, you know, that I come then with that balance, like when you need it, right? So yeah, I think what we're talking about sounds completely fair.
What do you think, Lauren, about the ILL distribution?
Like I said, I just, you know, because we're talking about 27 different libraries, and now we're talking about, okay, so this one's going to be in this quartile, and then this for that amount, and then this one for that amount, and this one for that. All I want, and I hear what you're saying, like, yeah, it's simple math and we can do it. It's just, it sounds like, I mean, if it's going to be, you know, 4 days work of figuring out which, you know, all the different components that make up the one rebate amount for each individual library, you know, I don't want it to be a ton of time for CCS to have to calculate. So, but it, you know, this is, I trust your judgment, Rebecca. If you feel like this is something, you know, you can just do using the Rails formulas, then yeah, you know, sounds great.
Yeah, I'd recommend that that I get the data from Rails and put together, you know, the collection expenditures and LSAP annual fee components, and then I can run the ILL and RB component 2 ways, and it will be very easy because of Excel. One looking at our CCS % in, % out option, and one looking at a divided equally option. And we can see how much of a difference it will actually make. And if we're like, I don't know, we can see what the numbers look like and how we feel about them. I'm not sure how we decide, but I think it would be easier once we have them. So if the direction from the committee is, let's hew closer to the Rails funding formula, I can work on getting that set up for your review prior to the first check going out from Rails next fiscal.
Sounds good to me. Is there anything we needed to vote on and all that? Oh, we're still talking about the whole budget.
Figure out the numbers, we might want to have a vote when we have like the final distribution, but I don't think we need to vote on. Rebecca, go figure it out.
I motion that Rebecca figures it out. I'm just kidding. Do you want to go through other budget items, other highlights?
Again, we have placeholder, it's still a placeholder here for OCLC billings. And that'll be the same in and the same out. There were no other major changes in here, but I'm happy if there's any questions or anything that anyone noticed that they want to review, I'm happy to go over it. I feel like we did a pretty deep dive at our last meeting.
No, but I want to mention that I think that you're doing the right thing with budgeting extra on the insurance benefits, because we all understand that that's something that you can't predict what's going to happen at the beginning of the calendar year. And you certainly don't want to feel like you're in a position of worrying about being able to cover someone's insurance.
Just, can you remind me, the CCS covers 100% of staff, and then how much of family, or?
We cover 90% of staff for medical, and we cover 75% of the total of like a family insurance, or employee plus child or employee plus spouse. Dental, it's just half of the employee and nothing for dependents or spouses. We cover, and then it's like we cover long-term disability for like $5 a month, and the employee covers short-term. Beth, am I missing anything?
Is that something?
Life and vision is part of medical, it's another thing I'd say.
Right, vision is part of medical. I'm sorry, Mick, you said the thing.
Is that something we review, or who reviews that? Is that the personal?
Yeah, I think it was last reviewed by the personnel committee, and it was, I think, the year after I took this position, so maybe 2017, because so it's been 90% of the employee for a significant portion of time. The previous policy language that was written about, employee and family, depending on how you read it, you could do the math in any number of ways and get different numbers. So we said 75% of the whole thing. Because it was trying to say like 90% of the employee costs and then some portion of the extra cost, but it was like a poorly written like word problem from the SATs or something. It was tough.
I know all about those. Taking over other directors, they know what they meant. Like, we don't know what you meant. So is that something the personnel policies, do they have it scheduled to be looked at, or is that something we should be thinking about? Because there's financial considerations. I'm not saying for this budget year, but I'm thinking for next budget year. Like, it's a big
I would say
deal.
that would be, and I'm happy to discuss it. My instinct is that's the purview of the personnel committee, which is executive committee, since it's like part of compensation and benefits. And then I think they'd be happy to take feedback from this group as well, because as you said, it is financial.
Becca, is that consistent with other consortia, or, I mean, that's ballpark with us, but I mean, I'm just curious, is that consistent with everyone else?
I don't 100% know the answer to that. It's as far as the employee portion goes, I think Swan was 80% when I was there, and that may have changed in the time that I've been here. And honestly, I did not pay attention at all to what the family coverage was, because I didn't have that.
Now you do.
Yeah, now it's like, oh, I gotta do math.
Yeah.
Jeez Louise. But I mean, we can certainly pull the other groups and find out.
I guess my question is, like, if we're going to lose, let's say we do just, if staff decide to leave CCS, I would guess Rails would be the main place they would go. So what does Rails do is what I'm curious about. Maybe they go to Swan, maybe they go to other things, but like,
Yeah, I
if we're
can find out what Rails does as well.
I didn't mean to go down this conversation, but like, since that was a much larger number, it made me think, is it the right number?
Mhm.
And we just raised our family, we do 100% of individual and we only do PPO. And we just raised our family to 56% from 25%, to try to make ourselves more attractive and probably equals, 90 and 75 is, it kind of meets in the middle there too. But like, that's something that we're going to be looking at every year, saying like, are we being competitive or even above market? And I don't know if CCS has a compensation philosophy or something like that where.
But we're working on it. As part of the salary benchmarking that we did, we didn't do the whole compensation package. So we didn't look at like PTO and insurance benefits, but we are looking to stay competitive for sure.
Mm-hmm. Everyone
Yeah.
says competitive. I don't even know.
No, but
I mean, like, I don't want to be I don't want to lose someone because they could make more money if they like went to Glencoe. Sorry, Andy.
oh, well, we'd welcome anyone on your team. But Mick, I'm glad you brought it up because I think it's an important conversation to have. I mean, certainly maybe not for the upcoming fiscal year budget, but certainly for the years after, because we have to be competitive. We have a good team in place. We want retention's the name of the game with personnel. And we want to make sure that we're up at the top, or at least near the top. Yeah, I think it's a important conversation. I'm glad you brought it up, Mick.
Right.
Yeah, I also, so Prairie Cat is separating from Rails, right? Like right now their employees are still technically Rails employees. But like Prairie Cat is joining IMRF, which I did not think was possible because they're very clearly not a municipal organization. But the IMRF board is having a vote and they fully anticipate they'll be accepted at their next board meeting. And we have a very generous, I think, employer contribution to, tax deferred plan. But I think recruiting from libraries would be a lot easier if we were in IMRF. Like I'm not vested in IMRF and I'm like, well, at some point I have to go work in a library for 2 years. So I will be reaching out to Carolyn to ask about that. But that could significant, like, I don't know if that would be better for our employees overall or not. So it is kind of on my mind, like, what are our benefits and how do we compare, especially as our groups are sort of shifting. The other consortia in Illinois are making a lot of changes.
That's
A staff member from the Des Plaines Public Library just took a job with RSA, which I think is awesome. He's amazing. And I think he's going to be a great addition to the team. I'm like, why'd you go all the way over there, Tony? Come on. Like we didn't have a job for him, but so especially if we move further into remote work, like I think that can really shake things up for who works where.
I think those are really great. The IMRF is a really good point. That's not something I even considered. And if we could get you guys an IMRF, it would be a huge, though it might be detrimental to us because we lose our staff because they're like, I'm sick of serving patrons. I want to serve librarians, which I can totally get some days. And the health insurance. So like, if that's in our purview, I think it'd be something we should, Rebecca can make a note for next year. We should talk about that and talk about it with enough time for budgeting. But obviously not this fiscal year. If it's an executive, then I can certainly bring it up there and talk about our thoughts from that.
Yeah, I think they both need to end up hitting both committees, but I can put it on a work list for next year for sure.
Thank you. Other budget things you wanted to highlight, Rebecca?
Again, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I feel we've walked through everything.
I feel really good about the budget. Thank you for all your hard work. Is there a motion? I'm not even sure. Are we motioning to bring this to the governing board? Or
well, if we're done talking about the budget, let's talk about billing so then we can do a motion that
we can do
hits
both at the same time?
Yeah. Is
Okay.
that cool with everyone?
That's fine by me.
So per my email, our pals over at the Lake County Treasurer's Office are still working on getting that final distribution out. And I was really overcomplicating things, Mick, when I last talked to you. I'm like, how are we going to do these numbers? I'm like, just use last year's numbers is what I did. It makes so much more sense than anything else I was trying to come up with. So I think that we need to have a conversation about what we want to recommend to the governing board. Do we want to recommend to them that they just use last year's numbers because we have them and it's April and we want to get things rolling? Or do we want to say these are placeholders and when we get the updated data, we're going to slot it in and use that? And so these are estimates and plan accordingly. We do already put out the OCLC numbers with the big caveat that those are estimates. So that is one question that we need to answer. And I'll just show you kind of what things look like. So we have the average adjusted income for each library for 2016 to 2018. So it's average adjusted because it is the average of 3 years minus any long-term capital debt payments that fit into those 3 years. And then we get the percent of holes that we've been talking about, you know, applying elsewhere as well. And then we have our total billings. 75% of our total billings is equal to about $1.3 million, and 25% is $455,000. The even split amount is divided by 28. Last year it was divided by 26 because we had our new members on kind of implementation billing. So this number went down for everyone this year. And then the proportionate amount uses this percent whole against this 455,000 to get the second component. So columns D plus E equals your total annual CCS bill. So because we're using last year's income numbers, there's no fluctuation in terms of like this library, you know, got more money and this library got less. The exception is that Palatine and Grayslake last year, you can see I don't have their, so I do want this here. I don't have their percent change because last year they were paying those implementation rates. So those were like for 1 quarter, 1/3 lower or 2/3 lower than what they normally pay. So you can see libraries went up. Basically, everybody's fees went up about $130, depending on what their percent whole is. So again, if we do opt to use updated income data, those numbers are going to fluctuate a little bit more. But overall, like this even split is going to stay the same. So the majority of fees will stay the same. And it's just this difference in this proportionate number that's going to go up or down, depending. Where we did have more variation is in the OCLC component. So for OCLC, we ask you for your materials budget for things that are title level records in the catalog. And we're working on a better way to share this information because every year I have at least 5 phone calls with directors where I'm like, okay, here's how you do it. So we're trying to make it easier for all of you. So we did last year switch to a 3-year average here just to smooth out when libraries hit, you know, bumps. And this year, or like rather last year, was like pretty bumpy because libraries made changes to their spending plans because we're looking at actual expended rather than budgeted. So a notable exception is if you look at Indian Trails, their spending has gone down significantly in terms of collections. And we did reach out to them and say, are you sure this number is right? Like, let's go through this math. And they were like, yep, it's right. Here's why it's right. We spent 60% less this year than we did last year on print. And then E was a little different, but this includes E. So So the sort of fluctuation in spending, in part due to COVID, is hitting libraries differently. So here we have an estimated 3.5% increase from OCLC. Last year, we actually had a discount. I have no idea what it's going to be this year. But some libraries are seeing, sorry, Lauren, a pretty significant bump here. And it is entirely based on fluctuations in that reported spending. So even though our CCS fees are going up $130, you can see that, you know, some folks' total is going up pretty significantly. And then we have a few notable decreases as well.
So are you suggesting that we should revisit the OCLC averages, or like?
No, in terms of procedure, like CCS wants to iron out our process for collecting it. But I think, you know, moving to the 3-year average, like that has provided smoothing already. Like if we were just doing the single year, I think these numbers would be all over the place. I don't have a better suggestion for how to manage OCLC. I just wanted to make folks aware that, like, it looks like if you're the person who just goes to this total change column and is like, how much more or less am I paying? You're gonna be like, what is CCS doing that I have to pay $2,000 more this year? And I just want to make it clear that it's largely due to libraries changing their spending patterns for all the reasons that we're all super aware of.
I think this makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Could you go back to the OCLC fees page?
Yes, I can.
So the 3-year total for Algonquin is 3.92% of the total.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the number we can use for the ILL rebate part?
I would use this percent whole for the ILL rebate part.
Okay.
So this is looking at the library's income, and this is looking at their collection expenditure. So I would look at the rebate more like the CCS fees than the OCLC fees.
Okay.
So in terms of the CCS membership fees and this average adjusted income, as a committee, would you like to recommend to governing board to apply new data when it's available, or to, for this year, just use the existing data and then, you know, next year update again? I could go either way. It's not hard for me to pop in the new data when we get it.
When is the governing board?
Governing board is April 14th.
And other people who are in Lake County, you're in Lake County, right, Lauren? Didn't they say they're going to get it out later this week? But obviously it's already Thursday. The last payment.
When Vessel Marcus sent it out a week and a half ago, yeah, I thought it was going to be either the end of this week or very early next week.
Yeah, so we, Beth was in touch with at least their FOIA officer this week, and you know, she said the data's not available, I can't give you an estimated amount, and that she would recommend waiting 2 weeks before resubmitting another FOIA. And I don't know if that was just so we don't get like flagged as a nuisance FOIA or because she doesn't anticipate the data being available.
We will know right away because we get a ping when they send that last payment out, or an email. And so if we get it today or tomorrow, we could let you know. So I'm leaning towards waiting till we get that final number, because I think it's within a week. And so if we say that, but with the caveat that if it doesn't come by April 14th, I'm fine using last year's numbers as well. So what do you think, Jem?
Yeah, I just don't know how much EAVs are going to change between the various districts. I mean, I can tell you that ours for this coming year went up, and that's great, but I don't know what, what last year's EAV and what our final percentage is going to be, because we've got different businesses that have closed, that aren't paying. We've got different homeowners that some are paying, some aren't. And I know that'll be different for every community.
Mhm.
I mean, one of the things that we could do is just send it out as it is now, with the caveat that, we'll send out an update, either April 12th or 13th. And I know that's last minute, but I mean, that gives Rebecca and Beth the maximum amount of time. Send out something before the meeting, if we all or any of us get our updates.
I'm sorry, could you, I'm not clear on what you get from the counties and how that impacts. If you don't mind, if you can.
Sure, yeah, let's back up. So we get from the counties the actual distribution of tax dollars that each library received. So not the levied amount, but like how much they actually got. And so that's what we're waiting for. That's the number we use for this
Gotcha.
adjusted income. So are you in Lake County? No. Yeah, okay, so then you don't have a payment yet, your last payment.
Gotcha.
But all the other counties have completed their payments and we do have their updated data.
Thank you.
Jim, what percentage are you at right now? We're at 97 something. I believe Sarah said she was at 99% already paid. So we're, most of us, the next one is gonna be like $20,000 for us or something like that, or $30,000. I don't expect more than that.
Let me do some real quick math here. About 2.5%. We're about 78,000 under.
Okay. We're 120,000 under.
Ooh,
Lauren,
wow.
Lauren, how far under are you?
I'm sorry, this is not something I've been looking at. In Kane County, they didn't send out tax distributions beyond December. So, and are you modified cash or modified accrual accounting? You're still talking about this year's, yeah. I mean, I wasn't even aware that Lake would still be sending out 2019 taxes.
They shouldn't. They shouldn't.
be.
They should have been done in December.
Okay.
Yeah, occasionally, if they have some tax sales or if there's a little bit of interest that accumulates, you might get a check for a few $100 sometime in April or May, but it's usually not more than a couple $100. But yeah, they should have had all this wrapped up in December. And when they sent out their notice, they gave a reason for why it was behind, and I don't remember what it was now, but the point is it's they're behind. So
Sorry, I was unaware of any of this, but thank you. I appreciate the information.
We're here for Lauren. So yeah, there's one more tax distribution to be made. It's probably going to be relatively minimal. And a lot of that was because of how I can extend it when people could pay taxes. And so we're kind of in this situation. So I'm of the opinion, and I don't know what everybody else thinks, that we wait another week. But I'm also okay with going with last year's numbers. So I'm fine with whatever. Rebecca, what do you think?
I'm happy to, as Jim said, send out the budget documents now. So governing board members have a chance to review them, and note that, if we get the data in time, we'll go ahead and update these. But if we don't, the Budget and Finance Committee recommends using last year's numbers. I'm fine with playing it by ear. Like, I'll be here. And I'm happy to spreadsheet. I love a spreadsheet.
Let's do that then. I vote we do that.
If the worst cases we're using last year's, because this is a 3-year average, it just isn't, it
Yeah.
makes so little difference. Yeah.
Generally, people are only going up a little bit for CCS and down a little bit, you know. It's not a
Yeah,
huge.
so the only caveat to that, I guess, is just something that libraries would have to deal with. If a library is starting to make bond payment, like if libraries started to make bond payments in 2019, like those would be deducted from their income, but theoretically they'd have seen an increase that was like relevant to, like they'd seen an increase from their income that was relevant to that amount that we're going to deduct. So it's possible that there might be like one or two libraries that are like, oh, but my capital payments started. But they would just be included next year.
Well, we'll probably get that data pretty soon anyway. So we'll say we're doing our best to get you what you need and to make everything accurate. If it doesn't have time, it just doesn't have time. It's out of our hands.
Exactly, yeah.
And we were probably when we our capital. So I'm not sure who else in Lake County who's built something recently.
I don't know, I'd have to pull that other sheet up, but it's the number of libraries that change that debt schedule year to year are pretty minimal, which is why we said, sure, we'll track that.
Right.
So I think it would not be a big deal.
Okay, good. So do I have a motion to approve the budget going to the governing board and the updated membership fees that can be edited? I'm not like Kate. I don't have like masterful motions. You know what I mean, right?
20.
So moved.
I'll second.
So I have to recommend the governing board approve the FY 21-22 budget and billings with
That could be
our
updated.
billings as current. The budget as written and billings as estimated. Does that work?
Yeah, as estimated, and yeah, I think estimated is good because then we can make it unestimated once we get those numbers.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Can I repeat that, Rebecca? Recommend to governing board, the governing board approve the fiscal year 21-22 budget as written and member billings as estimated.
Yes.
And then I have Lauren as the motion and Anthony as a second.
Yes.
All right. We'll start with Austin,
Yes.
DiDonato,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Rosenthal.
Yes.
When did Sarah get here?
Oh, hi, Sarah.
I've been here since about 5 after 10.
You're very quiet.
I've been listening.
Great. Are there any comments from visitors? Sarah?
I have no comments. This has been a very interesting meeting and yeah. I mean, I would say entertaining, but I mean that in the best possible way. Enlightening, perhaps, is the better word.
We aim to please. If nothing else, then I will adjourn the meeting at 11:11. Thanks, everybody. Good job, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.